Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies. Hope everyone's okay, keeping well and keeping safe. So this afternoon is about genealogy or researching your family tree. I'll give you some background information. I think it must be about 20 years ago that I became interested in researching the family tree. I think maybe as you get older, you might become a bit more curious as to where your families come from, history, lots of different things. And as we know, when older people in the family die, a lot of information gets lost. And once it's gone, it's gone. So my background, my father was a Sephardi Jew, Spanish and Portuguese, and my mother was an Ashkenazi Jew, and their family came from Poland. I'll start with the Sephardi side first because that is the easiest side to research. We're fortunate that we've got the Bevis Marks Synagogue in the City of London, and their records in the Bevis Mark records, they go back to 1680. So I was fortunate enough to be able to research the Gomez da Costa family with the help of the Bevis Marks records. Funnily enough, the copies are held in London, in Farringdon. It's called the London Metropolitan Archives. And Michael and I drove up there and were fortunate to park, and we told the staff what we were looking for. And then they said, we've also got a circumcision book. And I looked at Michael and I thought, I wonder what this circumcision book's going to have in it. Well, fortunately, it was just the records of some of the boys that had been circumcised, and it had the English date, the Hebrew date, their names, etc. But the main Bevis Marks records is absolutely fascinating because for my family, it just runs consistently all the way from 1680. And what I found was the first couple that came from Portugal to London were the new Jews, the conversos, that they'd been living in Portugal. Outwardly, they were living as Catholics, but underneath, they were practicing Jews. And as we know, in Spain and Portugal with the Inquisitions, that if you were outwardly Jewish, then you were executed. So there were many, many Jews that lived like this. So the first couple that came across from Portugal were called Abram and Abigail da Costa, and they married in Bevis Marks in 1728. So that was a very good starting point with those two. But that wasn't enough, not just that book. We are fortunate that we've got a lot of the census records that from 1911 now. Next year, in 2021, we'll be able to look at more records. And so by using my father and his parents, backtracking it, and believe you and me, there are so many Gomez da Costas, I was getting so confused with which line was my line. On my computer, I'm fortunate I've got an electronic system that I can input all the family, all their names, the different dates, and there was quite a few Isaac Gomez da Costas, and when I put in Isaac, they kept asking me questions. Is it this one? Is it this one? Is it this one? Eventually I was able to sort it out, and I haven't been able to print out the family tree because it's absolutely massive. However, using lots of different research organisations online is fantastic. I don't know if you've heard of Jewish genealogy. They call it Jewish Gen for short. and you can research your family, not just Spanish, Portuguese, but all over Europe. There are lots of different groups connected to different countries across the world. So for instance, if you were looking for French connection, they've actually got a French group there that you can join and try and get others to help you research the family. With Jewish Gen, it's very, very clever because you can research in different ways. And one way that I did was I was looking for other people that were looking for my family name. And I put in certain information and people contacted me. It was absolutely amazing to find out exactly which branch of the family they're on. I don't know if you saw a few years ago, there's a film, was it called The Woman in Gold? I think it was called The Woman in Gold.
Yeah.
And watching the film, in the film, there is a guy there who is an attorney and is helping a lady to try and get this picture back. And as I'm watching the film, I said to Michael, I said, I think this guy's in my family tree. And lo and behold, the actual attorney, Randolph, is in the DaCosta family tree. And I emailed him and I said, is that you in that film? And he said, yes. He deals in restitution, getting people's properties back from the Second World War. There's another connection in Alabama, in America, because some family went to America to live, and that was another branch. The most interesting and curious line was when my daughter was working for Barrett Homes in Bow, and she met this guy, a surveyor. And they started going out together, one thing and another, and his family lived in Australia, but they came from Ilford actually. And when she got home, she said, Mum, she said, Mike's mum is into family research and she's got some Jewish paperwork. Now, the reason why it was interesting was because Mike and his parents were Christian. So Mike got his mum to scan in the paperwork that she had and email to me. And in the records, I saw that there was a guy called Hananel Gomez da Costa. And I said to Shelley, you know what, I think this person is in our family tree. So I researched it and went back and I saw that Mike's descendant and Shelley's descendant were actually siblings. And the story goes was that Mike's ancestor, the daughter of Hananel, Selena, she married out. She got married in a church in, I think it was St. Pancras. And that's why that line then went from Jewish down to Christian. And I said to Shelley, it's amazing. You never knew each other. Here you are working alongside each other and you're both connected on the family tree. So that was, I couldn't explain it. It was absolutely amazing how we got that connection. Anyway, the relationship fizzled out, so that's that. But then there was another lady that came online and she lives in Bournemouth and I'm still in contact with her today. And she said, I know you've got the family tree and you've got this information and I think I'm connected somewhere. And when I looked at her family tree, the Selena da Costa that had married out, it was this other lady's great-great-great-grandmother that was Selena's sister. And so I put the lady in Bournemouth in touch with the one in Australia, and they're still emailing each other still. More recently, Abraham Cohen Court next to the Shul. Well, I didn't know who lived in there. I used to see this lovely, very well-dressed, dapper guy going to Ilford Kosher Meat. Do you remember when we had Ilford Kosher Meat in Beehive Lane? And I used to see him, and I used to chat with him, and, you know, where do you live? Oh, I just live across the road in Abraham Cohen Court. And I'm going through family records, and then and then with Beehive Lane, finding out different people that live in there. And then I discovered that this guy was my father's first cousin. So I rang the doorbell, and he said, yes. I said, I think we're related. So I went up and I introduced myself, and he said, yes, 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 we are. He said, yeah, your dad and me, we're first cousins. And then I found we've got another member that lives in Abraham Cohen Court, that her father was also a cousin to my father, and yet we lived across the road to one another for 15 years and didn't even know there was family. And it's just lovely that, you know, she tells me stories about her family, I tell her stories about my family, and we've got that connection. About a month ago, I had a half sister who passed away. She was a lot older than me. She was 90. We shared the same father. Her mother passed away when she was young. And the amount of stories that she could tell me about my father and about the family, and so much that I didn't know. And now she's gone, that's gone. That's why I think it's important to record our history, because we know that when our grandchildren are growing up, a lot of the kids, the schools ask them to do family trees. And fortunately for me, on Dad's side, I have got 2,000 people in the family tree, and it's growing. And it goes not only in England, it goes to America, Canada, France, Australia, New Zealand, and it's unbelievable. There's a guy living around the corner to me. I don't know if you know him, called Harry DaCosta. He's lived in St Edmunds for many, many years. He used to be, I think, a taxi driver. He also used to do insurance for the markets down Petticoat Lane, because my family grew up in Petticoat Lane. And I was speaking to him on one occasion. I said, do you think we're related? He said, well, I don't know. You know, there's so many of us. Anyway, I went online to see if I could get a connection, and I got in contact with this woman called Sharon, who lives in Cambridge, and we're emailing away. And then it only turned out that Sharon is Harry's daughter. Huh. So that was such a coincidence. You just don't know who you're going to meet online. That's the easy side. I'll now go to my mother's side. So my mum's surname was Abramovich. I don't know if we're related to Roman, but I might be able to find that out one day and get a few bob from him. So mum's father, Solomon Abramovich, and I've got a photo here of Solomon and his wife and my mum and her brothers and sisters, and it was taken 1911, old-fashioned black and white. I think a lot of us have got photographs like that. And I found out that my grandfather had been in the Russian army, and he wanted to get out. And apparently a lot of them, they used to literally shoot themselves in the foot to get out of the army. And he was able to come across to England. His sister and husband and 3 children lived off Commercial Road in the East End. So he was fortunate he could come and live with them. Somehow, I don't know how, his wife, my grandmother, and 3 children came from Poland to England, and then the other 4 children, including my mother, were born here. Now, with Polish records, we know it's not easy because of the Holocaust and the changes with Russia and Poland, you know, to get records. I remembered that my mum told me the surname of my grandfather's sister, and she's buried in the cemetery in Montague Road. And so I said to Mum, you know what, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to go to the cemetery. I'm going to see if I can track her grave down. So I went along. They gave me the books. I thought, where do I look? 1930s. I looked through, and there I saw the information. And I went to her grave, and that was the first time that anybody had been to visit her in 60 years since my grandfather had died. She was a young woman. She was only, I think, 32. I think she died from TB. So I took the photo, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to see if I can try and trace the family, because when she died, her father and the children then went to live in Paris, France, because there was another Abramovich brother living there. So Jewish Gen, I put out a search for the name Ast. And about 6 weeks later, this guy in America contacts me, and he said, I think we might be related. And I said, okay. So he's emailing me lots and lots of different information, and I'm replying back to him as well. And we connected, and we found out that Mark, who lives in America, his great-great-grandmother, Rachel, was my grandfather's sister, the one that's buried in Montague Road. Well, how fantastic that was, because he said to me, he said, my dad and my sister and my brother are still living in Paris. And he said, my dad remembers English being spoken a long time ago. He said, my father even had a dream about a woman crossing the water and coming to visit us speaking English. And Mark said to me, he said, that must be you. So quite a few months later, Michael and I, we went to Paris, and Mark and his wife and his 2 kids, they flew from America to Paris. And between us and his father and his sister and brother and nieces, there were about 12 of us that all met up for the first time in a kosher restaurant in Paris. And it was unbelievable that we'd got that connection after all those years. And it seemed as though we'd known one another for a long time. There was a problem that Mark's father couldn't speak English anymore, or really understand anymore. This must have been a fluke, because I went to university as a mature student in 1997, and part of my degree was French. And so fortunately, while we were having dinner, I was able to converse with him in French. Now, whether that was meant to be, I don't know. It was fantastic. And to this day, we all keep in contact with one another. Unfortunately, Mark's father's no longer with us. He passed away. And then I said to Mark, I said, do you know that my grandfather was one of 12 siblings? And he said, yeah. He said, I've researched. He said, I know quite a lot of them actually perished in the Holocaust. He said, but the one that went to Paris, Henry, or they called him Henri, not sure what happened to him. So then we started the search, and I went on. Once you hit one website, it takes you to another one, and you just can't stop yourself from going from one to another to search and search. And then I hit a French website, and I put out a search for family, if there was any family still around in relation to Henri Abramovich. And this lady, Catherine, emailed me saying, I live in the south of France, outside Saint-Tropez, and my grandfather was Henri Abramovich. And she emailed me photos of my grandfather's parents. And when I saw those photos, it was uncanny, because the grandmother, or should I say the other way around, my mum's sister was identical to my grandfather's mother. It was like two peas in a pod. And then Mark in America, he found the gravestone of Abba Abramovich in Będzin. That's where they live, Będzin in Poland. And a lot of the gravestones are written in Hebrew, and it was translated, and it gave so much more information, because from my great-grandfather, it then told me who my great-great-grandfather was. So with the help of Mark, we were able to go back to 1831 in Poland, which is quite remarkable, because the records are not there. They're in Polish, which I can't understand. I can't read or write. And with the help of other people on the Jewish Gen, on the website, we put the photo of the stone, and then someone interpreted it for us, what it actually said on the gravestone. So that was successful. On my grandmother's side, well, that's quite a sad story, because my grandmother left her mother and two brothers back in Będzin, I think about an hour and a half drive from Krakow. And with so many families, they perished in the Holocaust. Three of her cousins survived. One went to live in Israel, married another Holocaust survivor, and we're in contact with the children. They live in Netanya. The other two cousins lived in Golders Green. One of them, Sam, who passed away a few years ago, he always used to say to me, I'm the last of the Pivnik family. So I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm not married, I haven't got children. And by this time, his older brother passed away and didn't have children. So I put out a search, thinking, let's see if I can try and find anyone on the Pivnik family. Every year in the Jewish Chronicle, there used to be two families that used to put in for Jewish New Year. And one family lived in Canada. The other family lived in, I think, California. And I contacted them. And unfortunately, the ones in Canada just said, we cannot make the connection because the person that we need is no longer with us. So no success there. Do you remember the caterer, Sheila Kennard?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I knew Sheila very well, and I don't know, we got talking about families, whatever, and I happened to mention the name Pivnik, and she said, you know what, Lorraine? She said, that was my maiden name. I said, really? So she said, yeah. I said, oh, maybe we're connected. I then told her about the family that I'd contacted in Canada and in America, and she said, they're my cousins. She said, we've got one aunt who's still with us, but she's got dementia, and we will never be able to make that connection as to whether we're related or not, because with the name Pivnik, not everyone that has that surname is Jewish. There are a lot of Catholic Christian people in Poland with that name. Anyway, that's how I got started. I've always been interested in history, and I've loved it. And if you're going to do it, you need to spend a lot of time doing it. So where do you start? Well, we're fortunate that we've got a lot of the census in England. You can search back in England to 1837. There are a lot of free websites, but on the other hand, there's ones like Ancestry, where you can put in a name and you search it and it will come up with information, but then if you want more information, you've got to start paying. So that's one place. Jewish Genealogy, that is completely free. All you need to do is you register, you get a password, and then you can research anything from your whatever name. You can research it in different formats. There's different groups. So if you want to go inside, so before the French group, there's I think there's the Polish group, Romanian group. There's lots and lots of different groups, and they're developing more groups every year. And that is absolutely fantastic. Jewish Gen, I think I found out the most information from all of the websites, apart from one other. It's the Mormons. The Mormons in America, called Family Search. They have got the largest registration of people on their website. Now, the funny thing is this. So I start searching, say on the DaCosta side. Each person I put in comes up that they were baptized in such and such a day. I'm thinking, hang on a minute. They weren't baptized, but this is what the Mormons do. So yes, it's your family, but they've converted everybody by baptizing everybody. So just ignore that. Really ignore that, but that was really so funny. What else? There's another website called Free BMD, and BMD stands for Births, Marriages and Deaths. And again, that goes back to a certain time, 1800 and I think it's 1837, yeah, probably when the census first started. And again, the more information you put in, the more you'll be able to find out. You've got the electoral rolls. I also went to Redbridge Library on one occasion, thinking maybe they might have something there. So I asked the librarian, I said, right, I want to do some family research. Do you have any books? And so she took me to the back. She said, yeah, here you are. Have a look through these. So I'm looking through, and all of a sudden I come across a few people called Gomez da Costa. And there was one called, I don't know why, in abbreviation, Lucky da Costa. Now, why she was called that, I don't know. But with her and a few others, I was then able to connect them into the family tree. Okay, now on the Sephardi side, there's 4 cemeteries. I don't know if you're aware of that. The first cemetery, which is closed, is in Bancroft Road in Mile End. The second cemetery was on the site of Queen Mary's University in Mile End. I got in contact with somebody at the university and said, I want to do research. Could we have access to the cemeteries? So they met Michael and myself, gave us the key. We went into the first cemetery, which goes back to 1600 and something. Unfortunately, a lot of the graves are not in very good condition. You can't read the writing. So that wasn't really of any benefit. The second cemetery on the site of Queen Mary. Now, I don't know if any of you know Queen Mary's. It used to be a college, now university. There was an arrangement that they wanted to build a university there. And there was something like 2,000 graves on that site. So they came to an arrangement that 1,700 graves would be moved to a site in Brentwood. In fact, not very far from where, funnily enough, where my son lives. And when you go into the grounds of Queen Mary, there is a small area that is gated, and there's 300 gravestones still there. And so they let Michael and myself, we went in, We had the camera, we took photos of the gravestones with the surname Da Costa, Gomez Da Costa, because there are variations, and came away from that. The third one is in Golders Green, Hoop Lane. And you go into Hoop Lane, on the right-hand side is all the Sephardi graves. That's where my parents are buried. His sisters, his grandparents, his great-grandparents, uncles, aunts, the whole caboodle, as it were, there. And then the fourth one is now Edgeworthy Lane in Edgware, because Hoop Lane, obviously, you know, you can only be buried there if you bought a plot. So there were so many Da Costas, you know, in Hoop Lane, and I remember being on Jewish Gen one time, doing some more research, and I saw somebody, I think, living in Birmingham that was researching the name. So I contacted him, and then a lady who lives in Leigh-on-Sea contacted me, and turned out that she was another of my father's cousins. And it was Diana who told me that my great-grandparents are buried at Hoop Lane. I never knew this. And she told me exactly where they were. And so every year, or every time we go to Hoop Lane, we always go to the great-grandparents. And all the names are there. This is another way of researching. People don't realise you can get so much information from gravestones. Not all the time, but a lot of people will put the name of their children on, or their grandchildren on, and somehow you can make the links by having that information with people's names on the gravestones. What else? The Jewish Chronicle. It has a massive archive. You can research the archives, but if you want more information, you have to pay. Because what comes up is quite blurry, and it's not cheap. I mean, I don't know how much it is now, but a few years ago, I think it was going to cost £5 to do one research. So, you know, it's a lot of money. And bearing in mind the Da Costa name, there's so many Da Costas, and when people put the ads in, they don't always put in Gomez Da Costa, because there's other family. There's a Mendez Da Costa too that's not related to my family. So what about a family that goes abroad, that has come from Russia, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania? They've landed in Hull, crossed over, gone to Liverpool, to travel to America, to Canada. You've got a lot of the ship logs, the passenger lists, to try and find people, family that have travelled. And don't forget also Ellis Island, where family has gone to America, and Ellis Island, the amount of records they've got there. I remember quite a few years ago, I think Shelley was 21, so we're going back nearly 17 years, when we went to New York, and we went to Ellis Island, and it's unbelievable the amount of records that they've got. That we know, don't we? There's not only Jewish, there's Italian, there's Greek, there's whoever that came, the Irish that travelled across the Atlantic to make a new life in America. What else? So if you've got a family that unfortunately was in the Holocaust, how do you try and find people? Okay, yeah, we have Yad Vashem in Israel, a lot of people that perished. But there's another place in Germany, and that opened, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, called Bad Arolsen. And Bad is BAD-AROLSEN, Bad Arolsen. And again, you can research the records to find out about family. And I did find out some interesting information, but it confirmed what I already knew, that some other family who we thought may have survived did not. But it's all part of our family history. I guess that's how it is. On one occasion, I contacted the Salvation Army because they've got an international tracing system, and I was researching the Pivnik family on my grandmother's side, and I gave them as much information as I could. They said, it would take quite a long time, which it did. It was about a year, actually. And when they came back to me, they said, unfortunately, we can't find anybody. It didn't cost anything. They were just asking for donation. So, I didn't really lose anything, but you hope that maybe they will find something, that someone has survived. They've gone under the radar. My mum's cousin who passed away September 3 years ago, the day war was declared, he turned 13, and he wrote a book before he died called Survivor. And he's got the number, he had the number on his arm. He was in Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. He did the Death March. He was blown up on a ship that the British thought were Germans, but it wasn't. It was the camp survivors. They put them on board ship, and the British bombed them. And he went all through that, and he survived. How he survived, I don't know, but he survived. And eventually he found his older brother, and my grandmother was his father's sister. So they were able to come to England. They stayed with my grandparents. They lived in Mile End at the time. And my grandparents helped both of them get on their feet and try and have a life. Sam actually went back to Palestine. He fought in the War of Independence. Now, Yaffa, you'll probably know this. Have you heard of the Mahalniks? The Mahalniks? Yes? Yes? Well, Sam was a Mahalnik. I can't hear you. So the Mahalniks were people that came from different places outside of Palestine to fight in the War of Independence. And I never knew this. I found this out in Sam's book. And I went onto the Mahalnik website and I saw photos of Sam, a young Sam, sitting on a tank, who had fought in Galilee and had been blown up but survived. He wanted to stay in the new state, but his brother was back in England, and so he came back to England. But Sam's book gave me so much information that I was able to do more research. He spoke about the displaced persons camps after the Second World War. And again, you can go onto those websites, and I did. And again, I was trying to find other relatives, but to no avail. They perished during the Holocaust. So my research has taken me around the world, but the amount of people that I've now met online, across the road in Beehive Lane, that I didn't know existed, my dad's cousin that lives down in Lille-on-Sea, and other cousins that live in Australia, in France, in Canada, America. And I think to myself, do you know what? If we tried to do a DaCosta reunion, I think we'd need the Royal Albert Hall, because there's so many of us around the world. And we also know that the Spanish and Portuguese, like to spread their seed wide. And we know that there's DaCostas living in the Caribbean as well. And I think Ruth and Mervyn went on a cruise, and they stopped off at one of the Caribbean islands. I remember Mervyn telling me that they came across a synagogue. I think it might have been a Sephardi synagogue there. And I think they've written an article for the Shaw magazine, so I look forward to reading that. So we just don't know who we're going to meet round the corner to us, abroad or anywhere. But I've thoroughly enjoyed doing the family research. I find it so interesting. Not everybody does. I hope when grandchildren are older and they want more information, I've got it in black and white. In fact, I've got 2 books here. This one's called Our Family Tree, and you can buy that and you can fill it in, and you can put photographs in. And there's also this one, Grandmother Remembers. And I think that's such a lovely gift to give to somebody. And again, you can put photos, you can write lots of different things in about the names of the people, whatever you want to put in there. I know one thing, that when my mum passed away and I had all the photos, and what I started to do was I wrote on the back of them. And I wrote the names of the people on the back of the photos. I thought, you know what, one day, hopefully, my grandchildren will look at these photos, and if I haven't written on the back of them, they'll say, who's that? And they might look at a photo of me, great-grandchildren, say, who's that? And I think that's so important, that if you can do that, then you're always there. And that's it. So, any questions?
Thank you so much, Lorraine. If anyone wants to ask,
I will type something up so it can be sent out with all different links if you want to. If you're interested in researching, then you've got the different links that you can look at.
That would be really great. Thank you so much. It was a really fascinating insight.
You want to unmute, Claire?
I am unmuted.
I can't hear you. Michael?
Can anyone else
Michael?
hear me?
Michael? Can't hear.
I can hear you, Claire.
Okay.
You can hear me? I've got something about my speakers not working.
Lorraine, any questions?
Thank you, Lorraine.
Feel free.
Lorraine, that was very
Can't hear you.
Oh.
What's happened there?
My late mother-in-law worked at the Spanish and Portuguese home,
Michael?
which is now a hostel for the students.
Michael?
And my husband's best friend was the son of the master and mistress. And they used to be a cemetery at the very back of the home, because him and Morris would play there, and the master would come out and say, you mustn't
Your speaker's
play
not working.
here.
Please check your connection or use a different speaker.
So, and I used to work at Queen Mary College as well.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So I used to make sure I always went every so often to where the cemetery is, outside one of where the 300 graves are, outside one of the new buildings. Make sure the gate was locked when it should have been locked, and that sort of thing.
What a shame she can't hear you.
But it's all video, so she'll be able to pick it up later on.
Are you still recording, Claire?
Yes, yes.
I think Michael's unmuted it.
You can unmute yourself.
If anyone wants to unmute, if they want to say something. Lorraine, can you hear now?
Check your connection or use a different speaker.
Lorraine?
It's got audio there.
Okay, go.
Okay. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.
That's okay.